University of Chicago. This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. We are here at Noyes Hall on the UChicago campus for the second of our two mayoral forums. Today we hear from two of the candidates, 6th Ward Alderman Roderick Sawyer and organizer Jamal Green. As we did yesterday with 5 other candidates, we are asking questions on issues that are top of mind for voters: crime, transportation, and education. And how do we know that those are their top issues? Well, you, the voters, weighed in. In fact, many of the questions that we'll pose today come from our People's Agenda survey. We received around 2,000 responses from the public leading up to our forums. Thank you to everyone who chimed in. Also on the show today, since we are at the beautiful and historic University of Chicago, we'll bring you a special edition of our series, What's That Building? A map of buildings in and around campus with ties to Chicago politics. As always, we'll keep you up to speed on big local news, but first, the latest from around the country and the world.
There are institutions like the Institute of Politics and the University of
Live from the University of Chicago, this is Reset. I am Sasha-Ann Simons. We're coming to you live from the University of Chicago campus for our 1-hour live mayoral candidate forum. Now, here's the deal. We split the 9 candidates into 2 forums. Yesterday, we were at the UIC campus, and we heard from 5 of the candidates, and today's day 2. Now, these forums are a partnership between WBEZ, the Chicago Sun-Times, and UChicago's Institute of Politics. We're here with a live audience, and you can also listen to us on 91.5 FM or at WBEZ.org. You can also watch us right now as we stream live on both WBEZ's and the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube pages. Now, why did we split these forums across 2 days at 2 different college campuses? Well, for a lot of this election season, you've been seeing 9 candidates on stage at once. And it can be hard for voters to get the full picture of a candidate's views on an issue. So we chose to spread the event across 2 days and give candidates a little more breathing room to share their ideas and give you the chance as well to hear them. Now, we chose the UIC and U of C campuses because we wanted to engage with an important voting bloc this election, and that's, of course, voters who are 18 to 34 years old. Now, unfortunately, 2 candidates who had originally committed to joining us today, Brandon Johnson and Willie Wilson, they have dropped out last minute due to scheduling conflicts. We're disappointed that they couldn't make it to tell our listeners why they should be the next mayor of Chicago. But we are happy to have 2 of our scheduled candidates here with us now to make their cases as they have throughout this campaign season. Organizer Jamal Green and Alderman Rod Sawyer. Now, the rules of the forum, they're simple. Unlike a formal debate, there are no opening or closing remarks. Answers are not strictly timed. However, this being a 1-hour forum, it'll be my job to keep things moving. If a candidate does criticize the other, that person will be given a brief chance to respond. Questions we are asking today have been informed by the People's Agenda survey, and we got nearly 2,000 responses with Chicagoans telling us everything about the issues that matter to them and what questions they have for their next mayor. All right, sound good?
Sounds great.
Let's get started. All right, so we asked voters to tell us what issues mattered most in that People's Agenda survey, and crime was clearly at the top of concerns. We began yesterday's forum with a question from Levi in Edgewater, and I want to pose it to you two today. And it was, how do you plan to address crime in the short term? So meaning the first 6 months in office, and not the investment in addressing long-term issues that may take years to actually come to fruition. People want to be and feel safe next month, he said. So question to you first. I'll go to you first, Jamal Green. In your first 6 months in office, how do you tackle crime?
Well, let me first just say thank you guys for hosting this and informing voters. And I see amazing faces out here in the crowd. Very unfortunate that 2 other candidates dropped out of this forum. Hopefully they are considering dropping out the mayor race too. But, you know, we are at a point where we must have real solutions, and we need new leadership, not the same old politicians who are owned by special interest groups or trying to buy their way in office. And so when you talk about public safety in the short term, our short-term solutions are simple. We're going to delegate $100 million to a Department of Social Workers to respond to mental health calls that are 40% of the calls that come through on 911. We're also going to put $30 million into a youth intervention department. We're going to hire youth interventionists that have priority of resources for young people who drop out of school or who get arrested, and they will be able to give them free counseling, mentoring organizations, housing support, and help put them on the right path so that we can intervene whenever a trigger happens in their life. And then we're going to start to increase home ownership as well. We're going to use a single-family mortgage bond to start backing home loans in the neighborhood so that we can lure more stakeholders. And last, I'll say, you know, because we talk about short term, I'll be on the long term all day. But on short term, we're going to invest $77 million into a block club infrastructure program so that we can start to organize block clubs all throughout the city of Chicago and empower people on their blocks to beautify their blocks, grants for parties. They're going to have phone trees so that folks can be the frontline responders and really take ownership over what's going on in their communities. Those are some of the short-term things that we would do.
Thank you. Alderman Sawyer.
Thank you as well. Those are all great ideas. I'm not going to say that they're not, but in the short term, we have to show the citizens of Chicago that we care about them. And when we care about them, we want to make sure that our police are being effective. Although constitutionally compliant, we want to make sure that they're doing their job. And we start that at the top. One of the first things in the short term to do is to replace the superintendent. We replaced the superintendent by using the process that I was a part of putting in place, which is the establishment of the Community Commission. Part of the responsibility of the Community Commission is to select a superintendent. And the superintendent should be someone that has come through the ranks, that has the respect of the rank and file, that has the subject matter knowledge that would be able to guide me and advise me on scheduling issues, on deployment, on other policing strategies that will make it safer in the short term. We have to do that first and foremost. After we deal with the superintendent, we want to make sure that the Community Commission is fully in place. You will be voting on those in February 28th, and by that time, in the short term, we will have a commission in place, a new commission in place. What we want to do is make sure that commission is out doing their job, connecting with community, making sure that they're understanding the issues in all our 22 police districts, and reporting that back to the Central Council. And the Central Council then reports back to the new superintendent. We have to get those things in the short term in place first, and not to downplay the things that Brother Green was just talking about, because we need those things as well. But we need to make an establishment first in the police department, make sure that our city is safe, and to respond to the crime anxiety that a lot of us are feeling right now. We don't want to come out the house because we don't feel that we're going to be safe when we go to the store, when we go out to dinner, when we go to a theater. We want you to go to those places because at the end of the day, that's our bottom line. That's how we receive money to provide all the services that you deserve and request on behalf of the city of Chicago.
I'll give you 20 seconds to respond there.
Yeah, my rebuttal to that is, listen, we've already been trying to do those same things over and over again, trying these pro-police strategies. It has never worked, okay? Of course, I agree on replacing the superintendent on day one, but we got to do new things, which is why we need to establish new departments and start to move experts into these fields so that we can start solving some of the root cause of what's going on. Just continue to increase the police budget is not going to get us out of this.
All right,
I said nothing about increasing the police budget, and I think the things I talked about were new solutions. It's the newest solution in there, and it's the most forward-thinking process in the country right now.
All right, let's keep this moving.
Yeah.
Thank you both for some very thoughtful responses there. One of the other candidates who had committed to being here today was Commissioner Brandon Johnson, who had to drop out but did provide this statement. I am truly sorry that I'm unable to attend today's reset on the road with the host and fellow candidates for mayor. The event is in direct conflict with a meeting of the Cook County Board of Commissioners, and as commissioner of the 1st District, I have an obligation to my colleagues and the people of Cook County that I serve, end quote. We do not have a statement from Willie Wilson's campaign for his absence today. All right, so we are going to keep it going with more questions from people who participated in that People's Agenda survey. This one from Marcel in the South Loop. He says, I worked for CPD and taught at the police academy for 5 years. I know what reform looks like, and we have not seen it at the police department. What will you do to change the culture that contributes so much to the problems that currently plague the police department? And Marcel adds, I have ideas, and I'd be happy to outline them to whomever wins the election. So keep that in mind. Our question asker is available to collaborate with solutions to the winning campaign. So Alderman Sawyer, what will you do to change the culture that contributes so much to the problems that currently plague CPD?
Again, first of all, I will go back to my first answer and just leave that at that. Work with the commission, make sure that we're doing the job. We have to make sure that when we talk about reform, that we're complying with that, the consent decree. We need to make sure that every item, and we're far too far behind right now. I think we're somewhere at 5% full compliance with the consent decree initiatives. We have to do better than that. And again, it starts with leadership. It starts with the mayor, it starts with the superintendent, making sure that we're doing things, because right now, the police feel that they're working in a toxic work environment. They're not afraid of criminals. They're afraid of their superiors. They're afraid of what may happen in the event that a police officer makes a mistake or does something, maybe not turn a camera on in time, things like that, because right now they feel that the retribution would be over the top. We want to make sure that our officers stay in compliance with the reforms that were dictated in the consent decree, making sure that we have an effective police report, because I believe that a reformed police department is actually a very effective police department. So we make sure that we double down and drive down on the reforms, make sure that we're in compliance with each and every item as it goes forward, and continue that all throughout with training and giving professional development to the officers, because they need that in order to make sure that they can continue on with de-escalation and other issues that makes it where they not have to pull out their guns as often as they need to. They want to make sure that only in extreme instances of violence when they have to pull that gun out.
Thank you, Alderman. J-Mel Green.
Well, we have to, when you talk about the police culture, a big reason why the police culture is very toxic is because we're using over-policing strategy or trying to overwork officers to solve the community's ills. And that's a reason why it blows up the way that it does, because the officers are supposed to be the social workers, they're supposed to deal with young people, they're supposed to deal with all these things in the community when they should be only focusing on violent crime, which is why some of the things that I talk about is important, of having social workers respond to mental health calls and homelessness, reopening up the mental health facilities, having temporary housing. If we start to move some of the workload off of officers, that's going to change their work conditions. We also need to tackle mental health when it comes to police officers. We have moved forward a plan to put 2 therapists per district in the city of Chicago, because their suicide rates are some of the highest, if not the highest in the country, and change their work schedule to a 4-day, 3-off work week with 1 mental health day in between, which would also move more officers to the streets. And we have to have some accountability in the police department, right? Right now, we are spending $100 million on police misconduct settlements, and we could be spending $100 million a year on something else that really matters to the community. We've moved forward a plan to have some form of insurance, and we're going to work with police on a good compromise on how we're to stop paying the insurance policies. And we can't keep hiring the Proud Boys, right? We got a police officer on the force right now who has been to the Proud Boy rallies and have been shown to engage in some public racial remarks. And we have a zero tolerance for that, because when we just suspend them and allow them to stay on the force, it provides a toxic workplace for other minority officers as well as for the community. So we got to have a zero tolerance and have accountability as well.
Thank you, Mr. Green. You both have said that if elected as the next mayor, you would fire Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown. So we're going to turn to a question about the police department from Marie, who lives on Chicago's northwest side. Marie says, how do you plan to increase the police force, stop the exodus of police from Chicago, and provide safety and support to them? J-Mel Green.
Well, let me just say, David Brown, I think he's going to leave before he's fired, as I'm hearing in the media, which is a good thing. But we definitely need somebody who's more in touch with the city of Chicago. When we talk about the exodus of police officers, who wants to be a police officer when you're trying to put the whole weight on their shoulders, right? And so everything that I've talked about of removing the burden, right, that's not saying that we're anti-police, because in the long run, it's going to help police officers' jobs. If they're not dealing with mental health issues and they don't turn into tragic situations that can be on video that causes that officer to be in scandals, right? If social workers are responding to it, if we have interventionists dealing with young people instead of an officer reacting wrong to a young person that ends up on video and now is a case for that police officer. This is a good thing, is that we tackle what's really going on and hire experts to deal with the issues in communities. That helps the culture, and that helps people want to be more police officers outside of some of the incentives that they should be given, whether it is free higher education, whether it is down payment and closing costs for homes. I understand the importance of incentivizing the job, but I also understand that you can't put the whole weight on police officers or people won't want to be police.
Alderman?
Yes, I would tentatively agree with what J-Mel just stated. First of all, we've been doing, the last couple of years, we've had a pilot program in the 5th Police District regarding the 4-day on, 3-day off situation, and it has been working pretty well. It's going into its 2nd year now. Now, the issue with therapists, though, because we want to make sure the police have every opportunity to be well, and behavioral wellness is always important. This is the issue now, and we're at a college right now, and I'm putting the appeal out. Right now, we've been trying to deal with both clinicians, therapists, psychologists. There is a nationwide shortage. We do not have enough to fulfill the obligation to put 1 in every police district, nonetheless 2. So, and it also has, for our 6 mental health clinics, we're having problems staffing those as well. If you're listening out there and you're in college, consider a job in therapy, in psychology. That's the way to go, because we need people in those professions. But what we want to make sure that we do with our police officers, make sure that they're securing that proper mental health to the extent that we can get those people in those districts. Also provide One thing that we're looking at right now is providing first of its kind, a 20-year out for new police officers. That means they can retire after 20 years of service at the age of approximately 55. We have a tax center looking at the costing it out right now, but I got the idea based on my own personal pension. My pension in the city of Chicago is 20 years at 55. Why shouldn't our officers who, out in the street doing the frontline work get a similar pension based on what I receive?
We received a question about crime and gangs from Stanley on Chicago's South Side. Stanley wrote, "I hear gunfire outside my home just about every day. 2 months ago, a neighbor was shot by 2 gang members using AK-47s. What will you do to remove guns from gang members and reduce the shootings on the South Side?" Alderman Sawyer, what is your plan to reduce gang violence on the South Side?
I have already introduced into council the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. This is my second time introducing it. Introduced it under the last administration and now working on it again this time. What we want to do is make sure that we have a robust office that's focused on gun removal, getting guns off the street, illegal guns off the street, and also providing resources for victims of gun violence. We're also in that ordinance, we have a witness protection program in there, so we make sure that we can encourage people to give information to the police, and we will make sure that they're safe pending the outcome of the trial for those offenders. We want to make sure that gun violence is first and foremost in our administration, and this is something that I've been working on for years, and I'm going to continue to work on it as mayor. I'll have a different platform then, because as mayor, I can push things and talk to my colleagues. I have that experience and have that knowledge working with the colleagues on the city council floor. I'm a master collaborator. I've been doing this in ordinance after ordinance over my career, and it will happen with me as mayor.
J-Mel Green.
Well, let me just say, I have no problem giving a good job to Rod Sawyer to be my deputy mayor, man. But let me say, when you talk about the issues in the communities, we got to have alternatives, right, for young people, right? We need to make sure that we're investing in them. I said yesterday that a lot of our young people are out carjacking, and they could be building the cars. A lot of our young people got guns, and they can have hammers. We got 50,000 manufacturing jobs that are open right now in the city of Chicago. 50,000. Right, that pay over $72,000 a year starting out. Why aren't we creating a pipeline to these jobs, right? So we got to bring trade into the schools. We got to bring certifications into the schools so that they can partner and go to manufacturing. We got to have tech hubs. We got tech jobs that are 6 figures coming out of high school that they can get into right now. So we need to bring tech hubs throughout the city. We got to have alternatives, and that's why the youth intervention department is so important to have, so that we can intervene whenever there's a trigger, as well as make sure that there's massive programming in our school system. Schools should be open throughout the day and on weekends with massive programming for students as well as their parents. We must make sure that we're investing in every person and giving them a route to building a middle-class life. And last, I'll say, we got 380,000 lead pipes in the city of Chicago right now, poisoning young people, poisoning people all throughout these neighborhoods. We have billions of dollars in infrastructure money, and I believe the federal government even moved us some down. Why aren't we changing these pipes? This is a massive jobs program right here of all the people in these neighborhoods who can be helping us change these pipes or helping us build new homes. We can do this.
Thank you,
and we just got to have the intentionality.
Quick response, Alderman?
Yes, and again, all the social programs we all support. I trust me and believe me. But when we're talking about gun violence, gunfire, I hear the same things that the caller hears every night. I live 5 minutes south of here. I experience in that. And what I will say, there have to be consequences to actions. I call it the hot stove theory. When your mother told you don't touch the stove and you touched it anyway, you get burnt. You get burnt. I support all the reentry and all the supportive services for everybody, but until we make sure that we, one, have consequences to actions, and then we can provide services for those that have done their debt to society. If we're talking about gun violence prevention, if you hold a gun illegally and you're out here shooting at people, there should be consequences to your actions. I'm not saying that we're not going to be harsh like we've heard some other candidates do, but there have to be real consequences to real actions. And once you've got past that, we will give you all the supportive services necessary. We want you to be a part of society as long as you acknowledge that
Thank
you've
you,
done
Alderman.
wrong.
Can I quick 20 seconds on accountability? I'm sorry.
20 seconds.
I believe in accountability for sure, but the reality is that when you look at the data, just mandatory sentencing or causing any trying to have any type of sentencing guidelines, that does not change the reality, because the recidivism is very high. So folks come back to the neighborhoods and do it all over again. That's why reentry is important. That's why grabbing them before they get to committing that violent crime is important. And that's what must be our focus, not over accountability.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. If you're just tuning in, this is Chicago Public Media and UChicago's Candidates Second Forum with candidates who want to be the next mayor of Chicago. We are at the University of Chicago campus with organizer Jamal Green and Alderman Rod Sawyer. We're going to take a quick pause for some news. And when we come back, we're talking transportation, so stay tuned. And we are back now with more Reset. I'm your host, Sasha-Ann Simons. We're broadcasting live from the University of Chicago campus. This is the second of our two forums with candidates running for mayor, presented to you by WBEZ, the Chicago Sun-Times, and U of C's Institute of Politics. Here with me on stage, we have two candidates seeking the office of mayor, 6th Ward Alderman Rod Sawyer and organizer Jamal Green. All right, let's get back into it. So transportation was a huge issue in our People's Agenda survey responses, with nearly a third of responses talking about this issue. Many people were frustrated with the state of the CTA. And here is a specific question from Jen on Chicago's Near West Side. Jen says, I ride the CTA to work on a regular basis, and it has become increasingly impossible for me to predictably get to work on time in the past year. What do you plan to do in the near term and in the long term to combat the CTA's persistent problems with inconsistency, crime, and poor rider conduct? Jamal Green.
Yeah, this is such an important issue, right? The CTA should be a world-class model, and right now it's not. It's a mobile homeless shelter. And with many folks who have mental illnesses that we aren't addressing. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to remove the leadership. Let me just say that. I think we need better leadership at CTA that's more innovative. Number two is we need to declare a state of emergency to free up some funds for CTA so that we can deploy social workers to get folks off of the trains and pair them with services immediately, as well as use those funds to open up temporary housing housing, as well as a mental health clinic. That is important to tackle the root cause of what's going on so that we can start to get CTA in order. We got to have peacekeepers, a peacekeepers agency that patrol the trains to mitigate any concerns in any situations. And we need CTA to be safe, clean, fast, and at some point it needs to be free, right? Transportation is a right, and it should be, and we need to be looking towards making that a right because it'll actually help pour back into our economy. And so the immediate concerns is safety, the immediate concerns is addressing the root causes. We need to add more jobs so that we have more cleaning shifts on CTA. We need our cameras to be live so that we can actually view them in real time. There's a lot we must do, and we're ready to do it on day one.
Alderman.
Yes. Obviously, we want to make sure that the CTA is clean, safe, and reliable. We don't want it, to continue to smell like urine and weed. We make sure that we work with our CTU and our ATU union members to make sure that we understand how important it is to maintain the cleanliness of our rail stops, our buses, and our trains. This is a paramount importance. I know it may not sound big, but it is big. Obviously, we can use safety. I would eliminate the current contract we have with the dogs that we currently are on the officers. And what we can do now is, for example, we have multiple police departments and security departments at airports. We can take our officers from that airport, redeploy them, and also use that savings to put officers on CTA on the trains and buses to make that work. We also want to make sure that reliability has continued to be important. I don't know who's coordinating the plans down there. They have to be replaced. When you have a bus tracking system that we spent lots of money on, it should be reliable, and you should be able to depend on it. If you look on your phone or your tablet and it says that the bus is going to be there at 8:42, it should darn well be there at 8:42 and not be an empty one just passing you by trying to catch up with something else. That has to change. I do agree with us bringing in new leadership, bringing in transportation experts that will give us the right information. But what we do is do these things. We want to make sure that, and I have one other thing, we want to have ambassadors on the trains and buses as well to provide services for those that we, J-Mal just talked about us, but the situation with the homeless and other people on the trains and buses not seeking services. We want to make sure that we can offer those services to them, and that we can do by having ambassadors patrol the trains and buses, rather, and do that work and make sure that we can give these people the services that they deserve.
What is your response to your competitor, Willie Wilson, who has said that he would boot people who are sleeping on trains? What's your response to that strategy, Alderman?
I'm sorry. You said we should boot people that don't.
Oh, I didn't say that.
I know you didn't. I'm sorry. I know you didn't say it.
Willie Wilson has said that he would boot people who are sleeping on trains.
You know what? That's just insensitive. I don't even know if I should respond to that. That's just an insensitive statement to make. The people on the trains, they're not on there for convenience. It's a necessity. They have nowhere else to go. We just want to make sure we find resources for these individuals and make sure that they are getting the proper service, whether it be behavioral health, whether it be housing assistance, job, or some kind of training. We have to do better. And that's what I don't even know what else to say about
Green.
that. Right.
Well, I'm not surprised, especially because we got rabbits out there that he wants to hunt. I think that it's a human issue, what's going on CTA. This is a human issue. And everyone should be afforded basic human rights in this city. Housing is a human right. Why are there 65,000 people who are homeless in the city of Chicago that has a $28 billion enterprise? We have to be honest here. These are human rights issues, and the city of Chicago needs to step up and make sure every human in this city can grow and thrive and not have to go and live on our train system. So that's how we're going to approach in our administration, is making sure that everyone has basic human rights. Jamal
Green, you've said that you declare a state of emergency to free up money to put social workers on CTA trains and platforms. Yeah. How much do you anticipate spending?
Well, it depends. We're looking at some numbers as far as how many people are really on trains that need services, but it's definitely going to be in the tens of millions. We have to address this issue rather quickly, and then we also have to, address our shortages on CTA. And so we want to do a massive jobs program for ex-offenders and veterans, and make sure there's a pipeline to these jobs coming out of schools. Right? We need to have a good relationship with CPS GPS for our students to know that these are good middle-class jobs on CTA. And unfortunately, all the departments are working independently. So we need a pipeline to these jobs and have massive jobs programs.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Alderman Sawyer, you've said that you would improve the CTA bus tracking system. You talked a moment ago about bringing in experts. Do you have anything more specific you can add to how you would do that?
No, I mean, we have a very robust system. They're just not using it properly. I think that we need people that understand the technological advancements that we've already made and are inherent in the system and make sure that it works. There's always been an old statement, plan your work, work your plan. I don't think they're working their plan right now. I think the infrastructure there isn't in place, but they're not using it properly. So we have to use people that in their Department of Planning, they have a scheduling department at CTA. I worked there many years ago. They have departments in there that deal with the online tracking systems. And now that it's so advanced now with technology, we can be doing it better with minimal extra input, just having the right person in place to do the job.
We received many responses to our People's Agenda survey about environmentally friendly transit solutions.
Yeah.
This is one from Jim in Goose Island. Jim says, there are many compelling reasons why Chicago needs to maintain and expand its public transit network, while vastly reducing the need to own and use private cars, even EVs. What will you do to get Chicago on the right path to 50% plus of all trips not made via a car and vastly reducing car ownership? Jamal Green.
Oh, this is super important. As a person who have been a EV owner for many years, we have to make sure that we're addressing this issue in all of our departments, from decarbonization in our government by 2030, as well as making sure that we're moving our bus fleets to electric fleets. And I think that we can lure some of the manufacturers of these electric buses right here in the city of Chicago to create a lot of jobs. And I think that's another thing that we need to look at. We're going to institute a Department of Environment in the city of Chicago, a fully funded, fully staffed Department of Environment. And we're going to look at elements of the Green New Deal to see how we can bring it on the city level, because we need a Green New Deal right here in the city of Chicago. You won't have a greener city unless you elect Jamal Green. I'm just letting you know. We have a lot of work to do in regards to auditing our infrastructure, right? That's another thing that's important, from our bike lanes and where they're placed, about how we are narrowing our streets. There's a lot we must do to audit our infrastructure to make it more walkable, make it more rideable, so that people actually want to do those things, and have better transportation systems so more people want to get on public transit, and an electric bus fleet as well.
Thank you for that response. Alderman, what will you do to get Chicago on the right path to 50% plus all trips not made via a car and vastly reducing car ownership?
We have to do more in the areas of riding and walking in particular. We just talked about electric vehicles. We all support that. We've all supported establishing a new Department of Environment, a commission-level department, to make sure that we can get the advice that's necessary. But what we're going to also have to do is do our work, the work that a lot of us do on a day-to-day basis, making sure our streets are safe, making sure that there's consequences to people that are parking and clogging up bike lanes. We may have to look at reducing right turns on red to make people safe. These are the type of things we have to start looking at as a 21st century solutions to making sure that our walkers and our riders are safe, and including our drivers. And as we're moving to electric vehicles and other forms that reduce our carbon footprint, we have to make sure that these things are in place. And that includes making our streets safer, filling potholes, making sure that there are no vaulted sidewalks, because accessibility is for all. We want to make sure those are walking, can be have good access to streets, people that are riding bikes, they don't fall into potholes and get hurt and injured, and also making sure that all these things are coordinated in place, and they will be in conjunction with our Department of Transportation and our Department of Environment.
All right, well, speaking of access, I want to ask you both a question that I asked the 5 candidates yesterday. This is from Jane on Twitter, and she wants to know, how will you address disparities in access to transit that negatively impact vast swaths of the far south and east sides of the city? Jamal Green?
Yeah, and I want to say I agree with everything that the Alderman just said, and we got to also, just in regards to the last question, make it more affordable, and we got to bring forth subsidies. I know the state has brought forth a $7,500 credit. The city needs to do its part to make it easier for folks to transition to electric vehicles, and that's another thing that we must do, and invest in infrastructure throughout the city of Chicago so that there are charging stations all throughout the city. So in
let's
regards
talk
to
disparities. Yes.
your disparities, we obviously must audit the bus routes, right? We have a lot of routes that are not being used as much as they need to, and then a lot of places that actually need routes, right? So we need to audit our routes completely so that we're making sure that all of the disparities are being met. I also agree with the extension from the 95th Red Line station to go to the edge of the city. I think that is a big deal. Gill Gardens, who is without a grocery store, who is without proper transportation that can connect them to downtown. It's important that we audit this and do better, and we will under our administration.
Alderman.
Again, I think I talked a lot about this, about access and disparities regarding, walking, riding, and driving. And I do obviously support the extension of the Red Line, which is about 60 years, too late. But we're glad that it's coming now. But we want to make sure that when we talk about access disparities, we have to talk about all the methods of getting around the city. And I talked about them previously. When you're walking, you want to make sure that streets are safe, that we have ADA compliant crosswalks and curbs, making sure that sidewalks are accessible, particularly those when walkers and other that have other impediments to moving clearly. We want to make sure that all of these disparities are addressed, particularly on the transportation side, because we want the CTA to be the primary focus of getting from A to B throughout the city of Chicago, and that has to happen so that we can reduce our reliance upon vehicles. And that includes having access to parking structures and other parking rides, which we do not have on the south and west sides, not nearly enough. And I would say even in Hyde Park, it's challenging to find a park space over here to catch the metro downtown.
Thank you, Alderman. This is Reset. I'm your host, Sasha-Ann Simons. Thank you so much for joining us here on WBEZ for the second of our two forums with the candidates running for Chicago's top office, the office of mayor. Now, two of those running, businessman Willie Wilson and Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson, dropped out of this forum last minute after confirming that they would be here. That's given a bit more time to the two candidates who are here with us, organizer Jamal Green and 6th Ward Alderman Rod Sawyer. There are a lot of candidates running for mayor, and we hope that these forums are helping you to make your decision. And for everyone who is listening and the folks in the room with us here at the University of Chicago, I do want to encourage you to stick around after the candidates leave the stage at the end of this hour, because starting just after noon, we'll be doing analysis of what we've been hearing from these two. And we'll also be taking a look at where the mayor's race stands overall, less than 3 weeks away from Election Day, so stay with us. All right, candidates, I've got to move on now to education. Mark from Lincoln Park had this question. Can you explain specifically how the CPS budget can be reconfigured to put more funds in the classroom? Jamal Green.
Well, what's going on with CPS, is a travesty. As a product of CPS and watching our young people each and every day be failed, it needs to stop. And the privatizers in our schools are making millions off of the food and off of the cleanliness. But look at the results in our school buildings. And the only people that are suffering are our students. And we're supposed to be spending $30,000 per student. That money isn't making it into the classroom or into those schools. One of the things that we must do is we got to go to the state and we got to change our formula. It needs to change from enrollment-based formula to needs-based formula. Every school needs the investment that it needs, that they need, so that they can have the wraparound resources, so that they have updated books, so that they have after-school programs. It needs to be a situation where no matter where you live in this city, that there's a standard and a high-quality education, and we need to make that happen. So we're going to audit every dollar of CPS, one of the first things that we will do, as well as get rid of the waste and the privatization and bring back good-paying union jobs to take care of our kids in our classrooms and in our school buildings.
Alderman, how will you put more money in the classroom?
Well, the disparity in funding is abhorrent right now. We're spending more and we have fewer students. That doesn't make sense. But what we need to do right now is make sure that we're spending every available dollar toward the education of our students. And right now, the CPS is not doing that. We spend far too much money and far too much reliance on buildings that are decaying and making sure that these buildings are in place. But we want to make sure that when we talk about children, we should be talking about their education, their extracurriculars, their social emotional growth, especially during COVID, and they had not been interacting with people. These are the things that are important to students and to parents. Right now, even though I do support the moratorium that's in place until 2025 as it relates to school buildings, I think that we spend way too much time talking about buildings and not enough time talking about the full education of students. Where do we place our priorities? Buildings are important. I want to make sure that we use the buildings that we have, but we have buildings right now that are 5% occupied and 0% proficiency in our core subjects. That is not a sustainable model to educate our children. We want to make sure that as we're doing more towards really focusing on educating our students, dealing with the true inside of people. I talk to my principals on a regular basis in grammar school, and they're dealing with such ridiculous issues as relates to drug dealing, crime, gun violence, prostitution, and these are elementary school students. And I'm talking about this is participating, not watching. They're actively involved in this, and we're expected to keep up with the rest of the city on reading and math. It cannot happen until we really focus on truly educating our children, and that's what we have to do.
Thank you, Alderman.
Can I get a rebuttal real quick?
20 seconds.
I'm sorry, because we disagree. Me and my colleague disagree on school closures, at the end of the day, we should not be looking to close any more school buildings. We have school buildings right now in our communities that are land vacant with no purpose for them. We need to be talking about how we're going to invest in these school buildings to bring more students and more families into the neighborhood. And that's why our home ownership plan is super important. Our public bank, we want to create a public bank so that we can invest into communities as well as all that profit that comes back and be a stream for underfunded schools. So I just want to make sure that we know we got to invest in the school buildings and not close.
Thank you for that response. Alderman?
Very quickly, the disconnect is that each one of these school buildings costs almost $1 million a year to operate vacant. That means we still have to keep it hot. We have, keep the pipes from bursting because we are trying to reuse these buildings. We do want them to have some productive use. Don't get me wrong. I support a productive reuse of these buildings. But right now, we're spending, when you talk about our disparity in the budget, that's the biggest issue in disparity in the budget, the vacant operating schools that we have, the under-enrolled schools that we have. We need to look at a 21st century model for education, and this is not it.
But the only reason why these school buildings are vacant is because of the privatization and them selling our families this model that they can go to the charter schools and get a better education.
All right, let's keep it moving.
And they didn't. So that's the reason why they're vacant.
All right, we know violence too often takes the lives of young people. Alexander from West Lawn is asking, how do you plan on making schools safer? Jamal Green, you do not support police in schools, so in a minute, tell us what you will do to make schools safer.
Well, we're going to invest in young people, right? And I think that that's what's important. And having a police force inside our school is not the way to go. I'll be honest. I was a kid who was arrested in school because my teacher said that I yelled at him. And they put me in handcuffs and did a report and let me go on about my day. That's not how you treat young people. They need the individual attention that they're supposed to get. And we need to make sure that we are staffing schools with social workers, that we have after school programs, mentoring organizations, not just police sitting around with guns in our school buildings. And they can also be in the area in case of an immediate response.
Alderman Sawyer, you responded to our WBEZ mayoral candidate survey that police do have a role in schools. So how would you work to improve safety at schools?
Well, as you may know, I was the author of the Cops Out of School ordinance that was presented to me by Voice, which is the voice of youth for Chicago education, childhood education. I introduced that because we needed to have the conversation, and I wanted to have that conversation whether you agree with the issue or don't agree with the issue. I thought it was far too important for us not to have it. This is the issue. We want those that made the decision. It should have been a local decision in the first place, and now that it really is, the local school councils are now making that decision on whether they want cops, school resource officers, as they're called, in their schools. Now, we also have to realize that most schools also have other security officers in school that are not CPD. There are SEIU 73 union workers that are also in the schools providing safety and security there as well. So we want to make sure that if you have a decision, some people opted in, some people opted out. That was the best solution for me, that everybody had their interests. Me personally, I was an LSC chair for 10 years. My school resource officer was the nicest guy in the world. We really didn't need him, to be honest with you, but he provided an extra set of eyes, and he was always available for assistant coaching or just dealing with the children directly. So making kids safer is not always, I agree, not always a police presence, but you want to make sure that we have adults in the space that will assist and guide our children to make sure they're making right decisions. And we have that already. And based on what I provided and introduced, we end up having local decisions made, and we end up saving a few dollars out of it as well. So I'm very proud to have been a part of that.
Thank you. Candidates, Kirsten from Andersonville has this question. Let's listen.
The Early Childhood Workforce Partnership, a group of 19 early childhood employers, estimated that by 2024, they will need 3,000 new educators and additional credentials for 1,000 existing educators whose roles now have higher degree requirements. Additionally, early childhood professionals are significantly underpaid, which does not reflect the knowledge and skill required to teach the youngest Chicagoans. So what is your plan for strengthening the early care and education workforce in Chicago?
Your plan for strengthening the early care and education workforce in Chicago. Alderman.
Well, we just had this conversation last night at a forum. One of the things you want to do is make sure that the wages are comparable. Right now, we have a competition going on right now between private child care providers and CPS, especially with the early childhood education scenario. And what CPS is doing is snatching children from the private child care providers, and that's not fair. Especially since most of the black-owned businesses, particularly women-owned black businesses in Chicago, a lot of them are child care providers. You will be devastating that industry and removing that industry out of existence. We want to make sure that they stay in place, and there's a place for CPS child care providers and people that can take advantage of that. We want to make sure that they are working together. There's another issue regarding the Type 4 license that they're required to receive. I was talking to a lot of child care advocates last night, and they feel that ISB is placing too far of a burden on them right now with that license as far as retaining and trying to attract and retain qualified individuals to serve their daycares. We want to make sure we take a good look at that. We want to make certain that what they're doing is for the benefit of the children. But again, it starts with wages. If CPS is paying people $50,000 a year and the private child care providers are only paying $15 based on the formula that they receive, we need to increase the formula.
Thank you, Alderman. Jamal Green.
Well, this is definitely an issue in regards to pay that I think we must work with our state partners to increase. Look, I got a 3-year-old right now in child care, and I don't know what I would do if I had to have him all day. All right, and so this is an important issue to make sure that our private care providers, who are our folks that support us, as well as help the families, right? We pay a lot of money to send our kids to these providers, and we need the city to step in, as well as the state, to help out in regards to how expensive it is, in regards to the wage of the private care providers, because there's no better care, for these young people than the people in these communities, and we got to make sure that we're supporting them. And we also got to help them when it comes to development and spaces and ownership, right? We have a lot of buildings and school buildings. Some of them need more space. We should be able to help give them the spaces and the city-owned properties, as well as help them in regards to ownership, right? In regards to mortgages and down payment and closing cost assistance, which we will provide under our public bank. So there's a lot we must do. This is a huge issue because the care of children 0 and up is going to determine their future, and we got to make sure that we're investing in each and every one of our young people.
All right, time for our lightning round. We've got a ton of questions from voters on all kinds of issues. So we're just going to go down the list, and candidates, your job at this portion of the event is just to answer yes, no, or maybe.
Wow.
To these questions.
That's
Again,
hard.
Yes, no, or maybe.
Or response.
Or maybe. All right, Mark from Lincoln Park. Do you support giving parents vouchers that could be used in private schools?
No.
No.
All right. And that was Alderman Sawyer first and Jamal Green second for our listeners.
sure they
Just
could
told me to
tell.
say yes or no. So
I just want to make sure our listeners know whose yeses and whose nos those are. All right. And Mark from Lincoln Park had a follow-up question. Do you support an expansion of charter schools? Alderman?
no.
No.
Okay, Jamal Green says no. All right, Adriana in the Northwest Side says, will you support an elected City Colleges of Chicago Board of Trustees instead of continuing to appoint them? Jamal Green?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, everyone says yes. All right. Alex on the Northwest Side says, do you support a pilot program at a fixed cost to test universal sidewalk, snow, and ice clearance? Jamal Green?
We'll need to test it. It needs to be done.
Right. Yeah. I
So
agree.
it needs to be done. We need to fully fund it. Yes.
Alderman?
Yes. I have something to say, but I won't. Yes.
Thank you for obeying the rules there. Tammy from the Tri-Taylor area asks, do you support repealing the state ban on rent control? Alderman?
I'm sorry.
Do you support repealing the state ban on rent control?
Not at this time. No. No.
Jamal?
That's a maybe for me.
All right, Melinda in Avondale, will you continue the current guaranteed income pilot program? And for our listeners and viewers, that's the city program that's giving $500 a month to 5,000 income qualifying Chicago residents for a 12-month period right now. Jamal Green?
We already presented one that's even bigger.
Yes, no, or maybe?
$1,000 a month for 10,000 families.
Is that a yes, no, or maybe?
Yes.
Okay, and Alderman?
Maybe.
Okay, we're going to diverge from the People's Agenda survey. Yesterday, a voter asked if the candidates believe in ghosts. Today, we have our own question from Team Reset. Do you believe in aliens or intelligent life in the universe? Alderman.
I always felt that
Yes,
I would
no,
be,
or maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know this was one of the yes or no questions. I'm sorry. I thought this was a special. Strange enough, yes.
Jamal Green.
There are some aliens in the mayor race, for sure, yes.
I mean, and while I have you here, where do you fall on that ghost question? We got to know. Do you believe in ghosts, Alderman?
Well,
Yes,
yes.
no, or maybe?
Yes, I believe in spirit. Yes, I do.
And Jamal Green.
Yes, and I have to be with Cam Buckner on this, ghost buses.
We'll leave it there. Thank you to everyone who filled out our People's Agenda survey, which informed the questions that we asked the candidates in our mayoral forums yesterday and today. And our thanks to all the candidates who took part. We've been talking with Alderman Rod Sawyer and neighborhood organizer Jamal Green. Thank you to the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics for hosting us and collaborating with us on the project. And stay with us. After a short news break, we are going to tap in with a panel of experts to analyze what we just heard from the candidates and to keep that conversation going about crime, education, transportation, and much more. There's much more Reset to come, but first, why don't we go ahead and check back in with Lisa Labez. Hey, Lisa.